What if the mighty Aztec Empire, known for warriors' temples and blood sacrifice, also held stories of love? That history tried to silence Spanish chroniclers, wrote with shock about Aztec rituals that involved same-sex relations, calling them sinful and barbaric. But when we look closer at native codices and surviving myths, another picture emerges. One where gender and desire were woven into religion, power, and art. Certain priests and nobles lived outside the usual roles of man and woman, serving gods who blurred those lines long before Europeans arrived. So were these practices part of spiritual devotion, or just misunderstood through colonial eyes? The truth lies somewhere between faith and fear. Comment what time you're watching Morning, Late Night, or somewhere in between. And if you want more hidden stories like this one, give this video a like. It helps the history reach further. The sun rises over a city so perfect, it almost feels fake, like the gods built it just to brag. You blink against the glare of gold as the first light bounces off temple steps and feathered shields, off obsidian knives and turquoise jewelry. Welcome to Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital floating on a lake like a mirage. The streets are clean, the canals hum with canoes, and every direction smells faintly of maize, sweat, and incense. You'd think perfection leaves no room for secrets. But the truth is, this city's beauty is only half the story. Beneath the gold lies gossip, and beneath the gossip, something even older. Forbidden love dressed in feathers. You move through the causeways, your sandals scraping against volcanic stone, and notice how everyone seems to have a role. The merchants shout, the priests chant, the warriors strut, the scribes draw. Yet even in this orchestra of order, there's tension. Something unsaid humming under the sound of drums. It's in the way a young warrior's gaze lingers too long on his commander. It's in the way a priest smooths his robe when another passes by. The Aztecs lived under gods who demanded hearts, blood, and loyalty. But the human heart has never listened well to orders. What did it mean to love in a city ruled by sacrifice? The Aztecs believed life was a performance for their gods. Every act, eating, fighting, kissing, had cosmic weight. To live was to repay the sun for rising, so even affection had to follow divine geometry. The perfect man wasn't just strong. He was balanced, part jaguar, part poet, part servant of the sun. His body wasn't just flesh, but a vessel of cosmic order, which made desire complicated. Desire could build temples or burn them down. If you could stand atop the Templo Mayor looking down at the markets, you'd see a world that made Rome look like a dusty village. Thousands of people weaving through stalls of cacao jade and obsidian blades. Musicians played drums carved from human skulls. Priests walked by with hair matted in ritual blood. Yet for all its grandeur, this empire feared one thing more than death disorder. Anything that broke the pattern of the world was dangerous. And love, especially love that didn't fit their rules, could feel like a small rebellion against the gods themselves. Historians still argue about how the Aztecs really saw same-sex relationships. The surviving codices, those rare, colorful manuscripts spared from Spanish flames, hint at contradictions. Some passages condemn men who acted as women, while others show male deities sharing tender bonds with their companions. In a world where gods could shift gender, where warriors could dance in drag during festivals, maybe forbidden didn't mean what the friars later thought it did. You stop by a painter's stall. The man dips a brush into red dye and grins, teeth stained with annatto. They say love is like the wind. He tells you you can't see it, but if it blows too strong, it topples pyramids. Maybe he's just being poetic. Or maybe he's warning you that even the most sacred city runs on secrets. The air hums with drums as you pass a training yard. Boys no older than 16 clash with wooden swords, shouting war cries that echo across the lake. One trips, and another helps him up, fingers brushing a moment too long. Their laughter feels harmless, almost childlike. But an older instructor catches the look and frowns. In this empire, discipline is divine. Everything, your posture, your diet, your breath, is meant to serve the gods. Yet what do you do when your heart refuses to obey your empire? The Aztecs weren't unique in that struggle. Even the Greeks had their own tangled rules for love and power. But while Greece carved marble gods to immortalize beauty, the Aztecs carved hearts. Their devotion to order was both their strength and their curse. For every law about honor and war, there was another about the body, how it should move, whom it should touch, when it should kneel. Still, the more rules you write, the more people find ways to bend them. As you walk along the canals, the breeze carries laughter from a noble's garden. Musicians play flutes, and in the distance, dancers in feathered headdresses sway in pairs, not all of them male and female. You pause, wondering if the gods are watching, or maybe they're laughing. After all, if the gods themselves could love across forms, snake and bird, man and woman, why shouldn't their creations? A sudden conch blast interrupts your thoughts. Somewhere nearby, a priest calls the people to the temple. The smell of burning copal fills the air, sharp and sweet. You glance back at the shimmering city, the lake, the pyramids, the smoke curling into the morning sky, and realize something beneath its ritual perfection. Tenochtitlan beats with the same restless pulse as every human heart. Love isn't foreign to this world. It's just disguised. You find yourself standing at the edge of a training courtyard, where the morning sun slides down obsidian walls and paints young warriors in molten gold. The clatter of wooden swords fills the air. But what catches your attention isn't the noise. It's the rhythm. Every move is part violence, part dance. You watch two boys sparring, circling each other like twin jaguars' eyes, locked with a kind of intensity that doesn't belong to enemies. One lunges, the other dodges, and they both laugh before returning to the fight. You're seeing something the Aztecs themselves never quite found words for: affection, woven into aggression, admiration, disguised as discipline. The Aztecs lived under the sun god Huitzilopochtli, who demanded strength above all. Masculinity was both armor and altar. But here's the strange thing. While the empire glorified male power, it also glorified beauty. Not the rugged kind, but elegance, grace, even softness. Warriors wore bright feathers, jade earrings, and painted faces before battle. Imagine today's soldiers spending an hour perfecting their eyeliner before marching out. It sounds absurd, yet in Tenochtitlan, it was sacred. To be beautiful was to honor the gods. The more dazzling your body, the more divine your purpose. And so masculinity became a performance. You were expected to be strong, yes, but also radiant, a living sculpture of discipline and art. In this contradiction, desire found its hiding place. How do you praise a man's body, his movements, his courage, without crossing that invisible line? The truth is, people probably did cross it all the time. They just didn't say it out loud. Historians think the Aztecs borrowed parts of their gender code from the Toltecs, whose own myths told of heroes who loved in both directions, toward glory and toward each other. But by the late 1400s, as the empire expanded and religion hardened, the idea of same-sex desire began to clash with public morality. Priests warned that effeminacy angered the gods. Yet the same priests wrote hymns praising male beauty and grace. It's like watching a culture argue with itself in slow motion. You wander through a market stall filled with obsidian mirrors. A merchant hands you one, and for a second, you see your reflection ripple under the sunlight. The Aztecs believed mirrors were portals to truth, but also to deception, what they called smoking mirrors, ruled by the god Tezcatlipoca. He was beautiful and cruel, the patron of warriors and tricksters, and sometimes appeared in stories as both man and woman. Maybe that's why his worshippers wore both jaguar skins and fine feathers. In a world ruled by gods who constantly changed form, the idea of fixed identity seems almost silly. Still, society demanded it. Boys were told to act like warriors' girls to serve the hearth. A man must be a stone, a woman water, said one Aztec proverb. But water can wear down stone, and stones can fall into rivers. The neat lines of gender were always blurring, even in the heart of an empire. One of the most fascinating details archaeologists found comes from codices, illustrated manuscripts, where scribes painted scenes of daily life. In the Codex Mendoza, there are punishments listed for various crimes. Among them, same-sex acts were condemned harshly, especially for priests or nobles, which makes sense only if it was actually happening. You don't outlaw what doesn't exist. So the severity of the punishment is its own confession this love lived among them. You imagine two high-ranking warriors after a ceremony, feathers still wet from ritual dye, hearts pounding from combat. They share pulque, the fermented drink of the gods, and talk about honor, about death, about beauty. In that moment, the world shrinks to two breaths, two shadows crossing under the temple torchlight. No one writes it down, but the silence between them speaks volumes. Ever noticed how societies often invent strict rules precisely around what they fear most? The Aztecs weren't immune to that. Publicly, they insisted that real men devote their passion to war and the state. But privately, desire kept slipping through the cracks like sunlight, through temple stone. The paradox deepens when you look at their art. Male dancers performing for the gods often wore women's costumes representing fertility or divine transformation. One festival honoring Xochipilli, the god of flowers, beauty, and art, involved young men dressing as blossoms and singing love poems, not to women, but to each other and the gods. Xochipilli himself was portrayed in sculptures with a serene smile surrounded by symbols of joy, music, and pleasure. Spanish friars later branded him the patron saint of sin. Yet for the Aztecs, he might have been something else entirely, a divine reminder that beauty like love refuses to be boxed in. It's funny how every empire builds itself on contradictions. The Aztecs could exalt brotherhood among warriors while condemning intimacy between them. They could worship a god who embodied both genders, yet punish people for doing the same. It's as if they feared what they adored, a reflection too close to their own desires. You look up again at the courtyard where the boys are still sparring. Sweat glistens, laughter echoes, and for a moment you forget where history ends and humanity begins. Maybe the Aztecs weren't so different after all. Every age has its masks. Ours just glow differently under the light. You step into the courtyard of the Telpochcalli, the House of Youths, where every sound seems designed to echo. Wooden clubs clap against shields, sandals slap the floor, and teachers bark orders that blend discipline with devotion. Here, young men aren't just trained to fight, they're molded into citizens, warriors, and worshippers. Yet in between the drills, something subtler unfolds. Laughter sneaks in. Jokes pass under breath. Glances linger longer than they should. If the battlefield forged warriors, the dormitory forged bonds, and sometimes something closer to love. The Aztecs took education seriously. boys from common families trained in the Telpochkala, while the sons of nobles studied in the Kalmakak, where they learned astronomy, religion, and statecraft. Both were strict institutions that made Spartan schools look like summer camp. You slept on reed mats, bathed in cold water, rose before dawn, and faced punishments for even small mistakes. But that intensity, that constant closeness, created a kind of emotional pressure cooker. In shared suffering, intimacy thrives. Maybe you felt it too, those friendships formed in dorm rooms, barracks, or late-night study groups that blur into something deeper without needing a name. Imagine hundreds of boys living together from age 15 under the same roof day and night, their bodies growing into manhood side by side. They ate, sweated, and dreamed together. At night, the city quieted, and the only sounds were whispers, the flap of the reed mats, and the soft rustle of lake wind against the thatched walls. Teachers probably suspected more than they said. The laws forbade indecent acts, but as one old proverb warned, the lake has rules, yet fish still swim. In the Kalmakak, things were even more complicated. The noble sons there were trained for priesthood or government roles that demanded purity. Priests shaved their heads, abstained from women, and devoted their nights to prayer. But isolation can twist into something else. You can't lock away desire, it simply changes shape. Some chronicles from early Spanish friars, though, biased mention men living together in unnatural friendship. The friars meant it as accusation. But what if it was affection? What if the temples, those towering pyramids of order, hid not sin, but sincerity? Love unapproved by gods, yet no less divine. Think of the Kalmakak as an ancient boarding school, only with obsidian knives and rituals of bloodletting. The students weren't just studying math, they were learning how to bleed for the sun. Pain was purification. Discipline was salvation. You'd rise before dawn, climb temple stairs, and pierce your earlobe or thigh to offer blood to the gods. Now picture that routine done beside the same few faces every morning, the same hands helping you up when you fainted, the same voice whispering prayers with you. Pain shared becomes connection. And in that connection, maybe love was the quiet rebellion nobody dared name. Archaeologists found murals showing groups of young men bathing together in ceremonial pools. The Aztecs valued hygiene as holiness. Daily bathing was common even for peasants. But water rituals also had symbolic power, cleansing rebirth reflection. The students likely bathed before dawn, steam rising in the cold air, turning every silhouette into ghostly outlines. The water must have carried laughter and secrets both. You pause at a corner of the Telpochkali watching, as a young instructor wraps an injured boy's wrist. The gesture is brief but gentle, a tenderness hidden under the armor of duty. History books rarely talk about this kind of intimacy. They prefer wars and emperors. Yet it's moments like this that make the Aztec world feel alive again. One Spanish chronicler, Bernardino de Sahagún, who spent decades documenting Aztec life, described the students as brothers of the sun. It wasn't just a poetic phrase, it was a belief. Brotherhood wasn't metaphorical, it was sacred. To fight beside your comrade was to share his spirit. Some warriors even swore oaths of eternal loyalty that blurred the line between comradeship and love. Modern anthropologists like to compare these relationships to warrior pairs found in other ancient cultures. The sacred band of Thebes in Greece or samurai, companionships in Japan. Different continents, same heartbeat, love as loyalty, affection as armor. The Aztecs just added more incense and obsidian. And yet the empire's moral code loomed large. The fear of shame, the tlazoli, or moral filth, was powerful. Reputation was everything. If discovered, punishment could be severe beating, exile, even death. But as always, the existence of those punishments proves something inconvenient for moralists. It means people kept doing it anyway. Love has always been terrible at following laws. The night deepens and the torches flicker. You hear songs rising from within the Telpoch Kali training chants turning into something softer. The lyrics speak of courage, sacrifice, and the fleeting beauty of youth. Somewhere in those verses, maybe lies a code the priests didn't catch, a language of devotion that didn't need names or approval. As you walk away, you can still hear laughter echoing behind you. Maybe tomorrow they'll fight side by side in the flower wars, or climb the temple steps for sacrifice. But tonight, in that narrow gap between duty and dawn, they are just boys, half warriors, half dreamers, discovering that even in the most disciplined empire, the heart still finds its own gods. They say Quetzalcoatl once loved humanity so much he tore open the bones of the dead to give us life, and then was punished for caring too deeply. That's your hook into the strange heart of Aztec mythology, where gods behaved like poets and lovers, and where love itself was both creation and catastrophe. You've heard of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the god of wind, art, and wisdom. But what most people don't realize is that he also embodied duality, male and female, gentle and fierce, human and divine. In his story, the Aztecs found both inspiration and warning. According to legend, Quetzalcoatl ruled as a priest-king in the city of Tolan long before Tenochtitlan rose from the lake. He was the kind of ruler who valued peace over sacrifice, flowers over blood. But his rival Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, tempted him into sin. Depending on which version you hear, Quetzalcoatl either drank pulque until he lost his mind, or fell for a forbidden love, or both. Overcome with shame, he burned his palace and vanished into the east, promising to return one day in a blaze of morning light. To the Spaniards, this sounded like prophecy. To the Aztecs, it was heartbreak. The feathered serpent's story wasn't just about morality, it was about transformation. When he fell, he didn't die. He changed form, shedding his skin like a serpent. Duality wasn't corruption, it was nature. The Aztecs saw this reflected everywhere, in day and night, life and death, male and female. So when you look at their myths through modern eyes, you begin to see something revolutionary hiding behind all that ritual smoke. The idea that identity is fluid, not fixed. Imagine standing before one of those ancient temple carvings. You see Quetzalcoatl's serpent body winding through clouds, his feathers curling into blossoms. It's beautiful and strange at once, like something that refuses to stay in one shape. He was the patron of artists, priests, and lovers, the ones who didn't quite fit into ordinary life. If you'd been a young Aztec, struggling with feelings you couldn't name, Quetzalcoatl might have felt like a silent ally, a divine symbol of contradiction turned sacred. And he wasn't alone. The Aztec pantheon was filled with gods who blurred lines. Xochiquetzal, goddess of love and pleasure, sometimes appeared as male in certain rituals. Tezcatlipoca, the same god who tempted Quetzalcoatl, could disguise himself as either gender depending on his mischief. And then there was Ometeotl, the primordial creator, both male and female at once, the original union of opposites. Even the universe in Aztec thought was born not from purity, but from the marriage of difference. So how did a culture that worshipped gods of transformation end up fearing human forms of it, partly power? The priestly class and nobility needed order to sustain the empire. And order thrives on boxes. This is man, this is woman, this is sacred, that is forbidden. But mythology is slippery. It keeps whispering the truth even when institutions shout the opposite. You wander through a stone courtyard lined with serpent heads, the air thick with sage smoke. A priest recites hymns to Quetzalcoatl, calling him Lord of the dawn breath, of men giver of song. The melody floats upward soft and melancholic. You realize the words aren't just worship, they're longing. Perhaps the Aztecs didn't fear desire. They feared losing control of it. After all, even the feathered serpent was undone by love. It's funny how often stories of divine fall mirror human guilt. The Greeks had Icarus, the Christians had Lucifer, the Aztecs had Quetzalcoatl. Each tale warns against flying too close to your nature. But underneath the moral lesson lies a softer truth. These figures fall not because they are evil, but because they feel too deeply love, curiosity, compassion, all things that make gods human and humans divine. Modern scholars sometimes compare Quetzalcoatl's myth to early understandings of gender fluidity and non-conforming love. It's not that the Aztecs used those words, but their stories leave space for them. Even colonial writers like Sahagún and Duran, who condemned unnatural acts, couldn't help but preserve myths filled with transformation and ambiguity. The Spaniards tried to label everything as sin, but mythology doesn't obey language. It slips between translations, like smoke through fingers. You pause at a mural depicting the feathered serpent descending through clouds, surrounded by blossoms and serpents intertwined. Beneath it, a scribe once wrote, "He who moves between worlds knows all songs." Maybe that's what the Aztecs were really saying. The truth lives in between, in the spaces where categories dissolve. Think of Quetzalcoatl as the empire's conscience, the god who reminded mortals that perfection isn't purity, but balance. He wasn't just feathers or fangs, male or female sinner or saint. He was the living paradox that made existence beautiful. When later Aztec laws began punishing same-sex acts, it wasn't because their gods demanded it. It was because humans forgot what their gods had already shown them, that love wears many skins. You look up at the sky where clouds drift like pale serpents across the blue. Somewhere in those shapes, the feathered serpent still flies, shedding old myths like scales. And as the wind brushes your cheek, you wonder if maybe the Aztecs understood something we're still trying to learn. That divinity isn't in being one thing, it's in becoming many. The next morning, the city wakes to drums, slow, deep, steady as a heartbeat. You follow the sound through the mist until you reach the Quaupili, the warriors' compound where men paint their faces with ochre and black. Each color means something: red for the sun, black for the night, yellow for the gods. The air smells of sweat and crushed marigold. Here you see the empire's real religion, war. And like everything else in Aztec life, even war had its strange poetry. The flower wars, Xochiaoyotl, were unlike anything you've heard. Imagine ritual battles fought not to conquer land, but to capture hearts literally. Warriors met in planned combat to take prisoners for sacrifice, feeding the sun with blood so the world wouldn't die. To the Aztecs, this was cosmic maintenance. But between those who fought something unexpected, often bloomed admiration, affection, even intimacy. The man you battled might later share your fire, your drink, your dreams. It sounds impossible. How can love grow in the soil of war? Yet for the Aztecs, beauty and violence were siblings. You stand among the eagle and jaguar knights, the elite of the Aztec military. They are resplendent, bright-feathered suits, obsidian helmets, shaped like snarling beasts, eyes fierce with purpose. Yet when they laugh, it's disarmingly human. You overhear one teasing another about his painted cheeks. Careful, brother. Quetzalcoatl might fall in love with you. The other smirks. Then let him. At least he'd have taste. The comment draws laughter, but beneath it runs something older, a truth their laws would never admit aloud. The Aztec warrior code demanded devotion between comrades. Each Eagle Knight trained with a partner sometimes for years, sleeping, eating, and fighting side by side. Their bond wasn't just friendship, it was sacred duty. When one fell in battle, the survivor was expected to capture twice as many prisoners in his name. Some warriors refused to remarry after their comrade's death, claiming their spirit already belonged to the one they'd lost. Historians try to label this brotherhood, but you can feel there's more under the surface, something wordless and powerful, like a drumbeat under the chants. Even in the language itself, traces of tenderness linger. The Nahuatl word ikniu means friend, but also carries connotations of loyalty, intimacy, and shared soul. To call someone Noik Niu, my friend, was almost like saying my other self. When you hear it whispered between warriors on the eve of battle, it feels less like camaraderie and more like confession. You watch them prepare for the flower wars. Warriors kneel before their captains, offering copal incense and blood drawn from their own ears. The smoke curls upward, carrying prayers to the gods of war and beauty. Zaipe Totec, the flayed lord, and Xochipilli, the patron of love and song. The combination seems bizarre. Love and death in the same breath. But to the Aztecs, that was balance. Every flower needed soil, and soil was made of sacrifice. There's a story told of Tlalocan, the paradise of the rain god, where fallen warriors rest among eternal blooms. The Aztecs believed that those who died in combat would accompany the sun across the sky for 4 years before transforming into hummingbirds. Picture that thousands of souls flitting together over the fields of maize, their wings iridescent in eternal sunlight. Maybe that's why warriors wore feathers, to remind themselves they were already half on their way to heaven. One soldier beside you adjusts his jaguar pelt and grins. "If I die," he says, "make sure they paint me beautifully." You ask why? He shrugs. Because the gods deserve art even from our ashes. There's vanity in his tone, but also vulnerability. These men lived knowing every battle could be their last. In such a world, affection wasn't weakness. It was proof you were still human. Scholars sometimes point to parallels between Aztec warrior bonds and Greek Eraminos relationships. Older and younger soldiers bonded through mentorship and devotion. But the Aztecs lacked that kind of hierarchy. Their love, if we can call it that, was mutual and martial, a brotherhood sanctified by shared danger. 2 jaguars hunting together, 2 eagles soaring in tandem. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the heartbeat of the war drums. Its hypnotic thump, 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 echoing across the lake like a pulse of the earth itself. When you open them again, the warriors are marching toward the causeway banners, snapping in the wind, sunlight flashing off obsidian blades. The crowd cheers, mothers weep, and you realize that for all its blood and spectacle, this ritual of war was also a ritual of love. The kind born not from tenderness, but from trust so deep it defies language. Somewhere in the ranks, a young Eagle Knight turns his head, searching the crowd until his eyes find another's. They don't speak. They don't need to. The drums speak for them, the rhythm of every heartbeat that ever dared to care, even in a world that demanded it bleed instead. You wander through the crowded markets of Tenochtitlan, where smoke curls from clay braziers and women hawk roasted maize beside shimmering piles of cacao beans. It looks peaceful enough, laughter, bargaining, gossip, but beneath the hum of trade, there's another kind of economy at work, the exchange of secrets. Whispers dart between stalls like hummingbirds. And today's rumor, carried on a dozen curious tongues, is about 2 noblemen discovered in unholy behavior. The words make the listeners cross themselves, though the gesture belongs more to fear than faith. You follow the talk toward the edge of the plaza, where a crowd has gathered near the steps of a temple. Their painted priests are reading aloud from the laws, the Huehuetlatoli, the ancient words that guide morality. Those who act like women, one priest intones, defile the temple and bring shame upon their fathers. The people murmur agreement. Yet the moment the priests move on, those same people trade smirks and side glances. They've heard this before. Everyone knows that what's forbidden in daylight finds its own nights. Aztec law treated same-sex intimacy as Tlatlacoli moral corruption. But here's where it gets interesting. The law's severity wasn't about disgust, but about maintaining order. The empire was obsessed with symmetry, purity, and ritual cleanliness. Every act from eating to dressing had cosmic weight. Love that didn't fit the prescribed balance between male and female threatened that cosmic order, or so the priests claimed. So punishment became a way to cleanse society, like sweeping dust from a temple floor. Still, history is never as tidy as its rules. Chronicles mention that accusations were common, but convictions rare, especially among nobles. Power, as always, bought forgiveness. Some even suggest that high priests and lords quietly indulged in what they publicly condemned. It's a familiar story, isn't it? The louder the sermon, the darker the confession behind it. One Spanish friar, horrified yet fascinated, wrote that many nobles kept beautiful youths in their households for companionship and song. He meant it as scandal, but it's hard not to hear a different tone underneath envy, perhaps, or fascination. The same friar admitted that many sins happened in the temples themselves, where priests lived together in isolation, far from women, surrounded by incense and moonlight. It's easy to judge centuries later, but imagine being one of those priests, young, devout, lonely, and told your every desire was dangerous. Temptation would feel less like rebellion and more like breathing. You pass by a sculptor's workshop where unfinished stone figures lean against the wall. Some fierce, some delicate, many both. One catches your eye, two men carved, side-by-side heads tilted toward each other. Their arms are missing now, but their faces serene, almost smiling, survive. Was it friendship, devotion, or something deeper disguised in art so the censors wouldn't see? A stone has always been a better listener than the law. Even the language carried quiet defiance. Nahuatl poetry often used metaphor to hide meaning. The flower opens for the moon could mean a secret tryst. The bird sings at midnight, a hidden longing. Lovers spoke in riddles to protect themselves. And sometimes entire songs were coded messages. One fragment preserved in a colonial text reads, "He was the jade I polished in darkness, the maze I guarded from the dawn." You can almost hear the heartbeat between the lines. Yet the Aztecs weren't hypocrites without heart. They were people trapped between devotion and desire. To them, pleasure wasn't evil. It was power. The gods themselves indulged, sometimes excessively. But humans were expected to show restraint to mirror divine order without daring to match it. It's the same paradox that haunted medieval Europe centuries later. Desire is proof of life, punished for the crime of being alive. Punishments for breaking sexual laws were brutal. Men accused of effeminate acts could be stoned, strangled, or thrown into lakes as offerings to the gods. Women, too, could face humiliation or death for acts outside the sacred script. Yet for every execution recorded, there were countless unrecorded acts of quiet defiance, moments behind closed doors when love won, if only for a heartbeat. The empire's obsession with purity couldn't cleanse human nature. It could only drive it underground. Imagine a young noble in the Kalmakak, once praised for his devotion, now accused by a jealous rival. He stands before the council, head bowed, painted for shame rather than glory. The priests demand confession, but he says nothing. To admit would be death. To deny would be betrayal. Silence becomes his last act of control, a final rebellion wrapped in dignity. That same night, others whisper about him, over pulque, saying he was too beautiful to live, too bold to hide. Someone lights incense, murmurs a prayer, not to condemn him, but to thank him for reminding them that even in a world built on sacrifice, love was the one offering that could never truly be destroyed. And as the city sleeps, Tenochtitlan dreams. In contradictions, temples preaching purity, streets buzzing with forbidden laughter, hearts beating against rules carved in stone. Maybe that's the secret the Empire never understood. You can burn a codex, but not what it once felt like to touch another hand in the dark. Under the silver eye of the moon, women whisper stories the priests would never dare to write. You follow those whispers through the narrow alleys of Tenochtitlan until you reach a courtyard filled with the scent of herbs, sage maize, and crushed flowers. It's the house of midwives and healers women who know both birth and death, laughter and lament. They are not warriors, but their world has its own kind of power. And here, away from the temples and markets, the story of female desire unfolds, not in battles or proclamations, but in glances, songs, and secrets kept between breaths. In Aztec society, women were pillars of the home, but rarely of the temple. They wove, cooked, gave birth, and buried the dead. Yet some rose to sacred roles, priestesses of the moon goddess Metztli, or healers who served the goddess Tlazolteotl, patron of purification and lust. The irony, Tlazolteotl was both the goddess who incited sin and the one who forgave it. The Aztecs prayed to her for both temptation and redemption, a divine contradiction that women understood far better than men. You sit among a circle of women grinding maize, and one of them, older, sharp-eyed, tells a tale. It's about two priestesses who tended the temple of Xochiquetzal, goddess of love and pleasure. Every evening they sang hymns to her, weaving flower garlands by moonlight. When one fell ill, the other refused to leave her side. They were punished for neglecting duty. The old woman says, her voice a mix of sadness and defiance. But the goddess wept for them, and the next morning their flowers bloomed red as blood. You're not sure if it's history or myth, but maybe that's the point. For the Aztecs, the line between the two was always thin. While men's intimacy often hid behind military ritual, women's love survived in household songs and childbirth prayers. The Florentine Codex, compiled by Spanish friars, records how midwives sang lullabies not only to newborns, but to each other, thanking their sisters for bravery. Some of these verses carry undertones of devotion, words that shift meaning when spoken softly. Your hands are the light that brings me home. To the friars, it sounded harmless. To the women, it meant everything. You watch as a younger healer tends to a patient's wound, her fingers steady, her eyes tender. Another woman nearby murmurs teasingly, "You treat her better than your husband." The healer smiles without looking up. "That's because my husband isn't dying." Laughter ripples through the courtyard, but beneath it lingers warmth, the kind of affection that doesn't need to explain itself. Aztec art rarely shows women together, but what survives in their metaphors hints at hidden worlds. The moon itself was feminine, and so were rivers, caves, and weaving the acts of creation and connection. To share one's loom, a phrase found in a few Nahuatl poems, may have meant more than simple friendship. Weaving wasn't just labor, it was metaphor for joining lives' threads and souls. The priests, of course, would have dismissed such subtleties as Tlazolli moral filth. But Tlazolteotl herself, the goddess of that very filth, laughed at such fears. In temple murals, she appears half-naked, devouring sin with a serene smile. To her worshippers, mostly women, she offered a radical promise that nothing natural was truly impure. When you prayed to her, you confessed, yes, but you also reclaimed your body as sacred ground. Imagine the quiet rebellion that must have been a woman whispering her truth to a goddess who forgave everything. The empire may have punished public defiance, but within those temple shadows, women rewrote the rules in silence. One story, recorded by a Spanish chronicler, tells of a noblewoman named Macuilxochitl, accused of unwomanly behavior with her attendants. Instead of denying it, she demanded trial before the goddess herself. The priests refused. Days later, her accuser fell ill and died, his body covered in red blotches shaped like petals. The people said the goddess took her side. The friars called it superstition. But in marketplaces and bathhouses, women retold the tale as proof the goddess protects her own. You glance at the moon above the same moon the priestesses once prayed to, the same that still governs tides and hearts. For the Aztec women who lived under its watchful light, love was never a banner or rebellion. It was survival. A soft defiance dressed in song, hidden behind the rhythm of pestles and looms. One of the younger women beside you hums an old tune. The moon does not ask whom she lights, only that they see her. You realize it's a prayer disguised as a lullaby, and perhaps a confession too. In the distance, temple bells begin to ring. The women stop, pack their herbs, and rise one by one. But for a brief moment, the courtyard feels enchanted, the kind of sacred that doesn't need priests. You catch yourself thinking, maybe in a civilization built on blood, it was the quiet love of women that kept the world human. You wake to a different kind of dawn, the kind that doesn't bring warmth, only fear. The lake is still the air heavy, and on the horizon, strange sails rise like white teeth. The year is 1519, and the strangers have come. At first, the people of Tenochtitlan think it's Quetzalcoatl returning from the east, just as the old prophecies said. But it isn't a god. It's Cortez, and behind him come soldiers, horses, crosses, and fire. The world is about to be rewritten. They call themselves bearers of truth, but what they really bring are mirrors. And in those mirrors, they force the Aztecs to see themselves as sinners. Spanish friars flood the temples, splashing holy water on altars, still warm with incense. The idols are demons, they declare, their followers corrupted. And so begins the slow erasure of an empire's soul. Word by word, God by, God love by love. You stand in the courtyard of the Templo Mayor, as friars tear down feathered banners and replace them with crucifixes. To the Aztecs, these newcomers seem almost mad, burning the libraries of Codes, smashing stone gods, silencing the flutes of festivals. The priests who once sang to Xochiquetzal and Tlazolteotl are forced to kneel before the Virgin Mary. The dancers stop dancing. The songs stop meaning what they used to mean. And yet the Spanish chroniclers are meticulous. They record everything they condemn. In their journals, you find strange contradictions, long rants about the sins of sodomy in the same pages that describe the beauty of Aztec bodies, their grace, their discipline. It's as though disgust and fascination were tangled together, each feeding the other. The friars build churches over the ruins of temples, baptizing whole neighborhoods in a single day. In one converted schoolhouse, young Aztec students are forced to recite new catechisms. You must reject your old ways, the friar says, pacing the room. No more idols, no more sacrifice, no more wickedness of the flesh. But the boys, once Telpochcali students, exchange glances. They know what the friar doesn't desire isn't an idol you can smash. The Spanish bring not just religion, but vocabulary. Words like pecado, sin, and Vergüenza, shame, seep into Nahuatl speech. Where once the Aztecs spoke of impurity as imbalance, now it becomes moral rot. Acts once described as unfitting are now damnable. The difference seems subtle, but it changes everything. Under the new empire, guilt replaces duty. Confession replaces balance. In this new order, love itself becomes dangerous. The friars are obsessed with controlling bodies, who touches whom, who sleeps, where, who even dares to look too long. The Aztec emphasis on duality and divine transformation vanishes. A world once filled with gods who could change shape is replaced by a single God who never changes and never forgives the wrong kind of love. You overhear a sermon in the plaza. The friar's voice echoes against the stone. These people lived in darkness. Men with men, women with women, beasts in human form. The crowd shifts uneasily. Behind them, the smoke of burning codices twists upward like mourning ribbons. Knowledge itself is turning to ash. And yet, in the ruins, something refuses to die. Former priests secretly hide fragments of scrolls beneath floor tiles. Families tell old myths at night, whispering them to children as bedtime tales. One woman still sings to Tlazolteotl under her breath, while pretending to pray the rosary. Even the friars can't stop people from dreaming. Desire has gone underground, trading its feathers for shadows. There's a story half legend, half truth about a young convert named Itzcoatl, baptized as Juan. He worked in a Spanish monastery as a translator, helping friars write dictionaries of Nahuatl. But in the margins of those manuscripts, he began slipping in double meanings. The word for friend became soul mirror. The word for purity gained a secret synonym balance. He hid the old wisdom in plain sight. Some of those words still survive, passed quietly from speaker to speaker. You can almost imagine what it felt like for the people who lived through it. One day their gods are alive, laughing, changing shape. The next they're told they've always been demons. Love that once honored the divine now condemns the soul. The Aztec calendar ends not because time stops, but because language is rewritten. Cortez and his men record everything: the blood, the gold, the confessions. But they miss what matters most, the pulse beneath the rubble. In quiet courtyards where candles flicker against broken idols, you can still hear the old prayers reshaping themselves. Forgive us, they whisper to both gods and themselves for the love we cannot name. As the conquistadors ride through the shattered city, they think they've conquered everything. Faith, knowledge, passion. But the wind over Lake Texcoco still carries the scent of copal and marigold, faint but defiant. The empire may fall, but its heartbeat continues steady and stubborn, like the rhythm of drums that no one dares play anymore. Night returns to Tenochtitlan, or what's left of it. The pyramids are gone. The lake is filling with rubble, and Spanish villas rise where temples once touched the clouds. But if you listen carefully, the city still breathes. Inside kitchens, behind courtyard walls, and in the soft murmur of lullabies, something ancient stirs. The empire may have fallen, but affection, real human and inconvenient, has learned how to hide. You're standing near a candlelit room where a family gathers for evening prayer. On the wall hangs a crucifix, but beneath it, someone has tucked a small faded feather. To the friars, it's decoration. To the family, it's remembrance, the symbol of Quetzalcoatl, the god who once blurred boundaries between sky and serpent, male and female, sacred and profane. In this new world, the old gods survive only in disguise. Across the city, love survives the same way. Two young men meet to play music at a saint's festival, their flutes weaving notes that sound suspiciously like an old hymn to Xochipilli. Two women in a marketplace swap flowers every morning, pretending it's commerce, not devotion. People have learned the art of camouflage, the ability to carry old fire in new lamps. The Spanish chroniclers, so proud of their conversions, never understood this. They saw only obedience. But language kept secrets. Nahuatl was too poetic to ever surrender completely. Words bent themselves into double meanings. Laughter folded over grief prayers, slipped between translations. When one convert said, "God is balance," a friar might nod approvingly, never realizing the phrase still carried the memory of Ometeotl, the god who was both halves of the whole. It's strange, isn't it? How survival often begins with pretending. The more forbidden something becomes, the better humans get at disguising it. A song becomes a sermon. A gesture becomes a joke. A forbidden glance turns into accidental eye contact during Mass. History calls it repression. The heart calls it adaptation. Some evidence of this hidden resilience shows up in colonial documents, though you have to read between the lines. A 16th century friar once complained that the natives confess sins they do not regret and smile when scolded. What he didn't realize was that the smiles weren't defiance, they were memory. The people were remembering a time when love wasn't shameful, when the divine looked like them. Over time, these hidden loves begin to merge with Christian imagery. Saints replace gods, but the emotions remain the same. Xochiquetzal's tenderness becomes the Virgin's mercy. Quetzalcoatl's sacrifice echoes in Christ's passion. The boundaries blur until even faith becomes a secret act of translation. In one colonial prayer book discovered in Oaxaca, a line reads, "Lord, make us like the feathered serpent, gentle in wind, fierce in heart." The friars must have missed that one. You pass a group of artisans painting frescoes for a church wall. The overseer checks that every angel looks properly European. But when he leaves, the painters add small touches: brown skin, obsidian eyes, feathers in the halo. A quiet rebellion disguised as beauty. One artist, a man named Coyotzin, even paints two angels facing each other too closely, their wings brushing at the edges. Centuries later, restorers will call it symbolic symmetry. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was love hiding in pigment. Outside, the city hums again, markets buzzing bells, clanging languages, blending. Tenochtitlan has become Mexico City. But beneath its stones runs the same lake water, the same heartbeat. The people have learned that the surest way to preserve something sacred is to tuck it inside the ordinary. Sometimes even the friars unwittingly helped. They taught music and art to their converts, encouraging devotion through beauty. But music has its own mind. Those choirs of boys singing Latin hymns began sneaking in Nahuatl rhythms, old melodies hidden under new words. If you listen closely, you could still hear Xochipilli's laughter between the Ave Marias. You walk through a narrow street and pass an old woman selling candles. She gives you one and says softly, "For the saints," or whoever you remember. You realize that's the perfect summary of this era. Faith layered over faith each generation, lighting a wick for what came before. And so the old loves survive not as rebellion, but as tradition. Lovers hide their affection behind friendship, their rituals behind chores, their prayers behind hymns. It's quiet, steady resistance, the kind that leaves no monuments, only stories. Every time a festival dancer twirls with too much grace, every time a painter adds one too many feathers to an angel, the past slips a note under the door of the present. The Aztecs may have lost their empire, but not their art of survival. You can conquer a people, burn their codices, rename their gods, but you can't stop them from remembering how to love. Centuries later, you stand in the middle of Mexico City, once Tenochtitlan, where skyscrapers rise over the ghost of the lake and traffic replaces the rhythm of drums. The air smells of exhaust and street tacos instead of incense. But if you close your eyes, you can still feel the heartbeat of the old city pulsing beneath the pavement. Somewhere under all this concrete, the stones of the Templo Mayor still hum, and if you listen long enough, they start to whisper what history tried to forget. Those whispers have found new voices now. Murals bloom on the walls. Bright feathers swirling serpents, gods, and lovers, reborn in spray paint. In Coyoacan, artists gather to retell Aztec myths through color, reclaiming what colonization tried to erase. One mural shows Quetzalcoatl rising from flames. Feathers outstretched, human figures of all genders intertwined beneath him. A boy taking a selfie beside it jokes, guess the old gods were more progressive than the priests. He's not wrong. Modern Mexico is rediscovering what the friars buried. Scholars, poets, and activists are dusting off the codices, rereading them not as sins or curiosities, but as maps of a more fluid world. The god Xochipilli, once demonized as a patron of lust, is now celebrated as a symbol of queer joy, a deity of music, beauty, and love that defies definition. His stone statue, long hidden in a museum basement, now sits proudly on display. You walk up to it, and it's breathtaking. His head tilted back in ecstasy, his body wrapped in flowers. For centuries, he was called a warning. Now he's called home. But it's not just museums reclaiming him. Every June during Mexico City's Pride celebrations, people carry banners with his name painted in gold letters. Xochipilli vive, the flower prince lives. The crowd cheers, drums pound, and feathers swirl again like echoes of ancient festivals resurrected. In that moment, the line between past and present blurs. The parade looks less like rebellion and more like remembrance. You wander through the crowd, and an old man selling paper masks waves you over. "You want Quetzalcoatl or Tezcatlipoca?" he asks with a wink. You pick the serpent. He laughs. Good choice. That one reminds us not to be ashamed of what we shed. You realize that's the entire moral of this city. This story shedding shame, keeping the skin of memory. Not everyone sees it that way, of course. Some still cling to the old colonial morality, muttering about tradition. But tradition, if you trace it far enough back, was never pure. It was always fluid, woven, layered, reborn. The Aztecs understood that. Their gods changed shape, their myths contradicted themselves. Their world thrived on balance, not rigidity. What colonization called sin was often just humanity being honest. Even the landscape remembers. Archaeologists excavating the ancient lake bed sometimes find small carved figures. 2 men clasping hands, 2 women seated together under a tree. Officially, they're labeled as companions. Unofficially, everyone knows better. Love leaves fingerprints even on stone. As night falls, the city lights flicker on modern fire in an ancient place. Somewhere, a mariachi band begins to play. Their song isn't in Nahuatl, but its rhythm feels familiar, like the old training chants of the Telpochcali, like the pulse of the flower wars, like the laughter of the moon's priestesses. The melody carries everything that survived the discipline, the longing, the beauty, the defiance. You think of all the people who came before those boys in the dormitories. The priestesses under the moon, the hidden poets, the lovers who refused to forget each other, even as their world crumbled. They never got parades or murals, but they left behind something better: continuity. Every smile that hides affection, every song that slips truth between lines, every act of courage to live as you are, that's their legacy. And maybe that's what it means to be Aztec still after all these centuries. Not the wars or the sacrifices, but the stubbornness of the heart, the refusal to stop feeling even when God's kings or conquerors said you should. You look up at the skyscrapers reflecting the night sky. And for a second they resemble the old temples, towers built towards something greater. Maybe that's the final secret of Tenochtitlan. It was never just a city of blood, but of balance. Never just of conquest, but of connection. The drums are gone, but the rhythm remains in heartbeat, in footsteps, in laughter. The gods have changed their names, but they're still here watching from murals and mirrors. And as the city exhales beneath the stars, you understand that love, like the wind that once carried Quetzalcoatl's feathers, can never be conquered. It only changes direction. Beneath the golden feathers of Tenochtitlan, not everyone wielded a sword. Some carried obsidian knives for another purpose. While warriors fed the sun with hearts, priests fed the gods with rituals, blood and sleepless devotion. Their lives weren't about glory, but sacrifice. So let's slip behind the temple walls and discover the daily life of an Aztec priest. The first sound isn't birds or footsteps, it's drums. Deep, slow, hollow beats roll through the blackness before dawn, shaking you awake inside your reed mat. The city isn't awake yet, but the gods are. You lie still for a moment, staring into the ceiling of woven cane, listening to that heartbeat of wood and hide. It's the signal time to cleanse yourself, time to greet another day, as one of the keepers of Tenochtitlan's soul. You stretch out your arms, bones cracking like corn roasting over coals. The air is cold, tasting of river mist and ashes from last night's incense. You pull on a cotton cloak, rough and plain. Priests aren't supposed to glitter like nobles. The luxury belongs to the gods, not to their servants. You step outside your small chamber within the temple precinct, and the world still looks half-dreamed. The great temple looms ahead, its twin towers ghostly under starlight, while the sacred fires atop it have dwindled to thin orange threads. You think of them as sleeping serpents. You'll have to wake them soon. You start walking toward the temple yard. Every few steps, your bare feet brush the cold stone slick with dew. Somewhere nearby, another priest coughs. Another whispers a prayer. You hear the distant croak of frogs from the canals, and above that the faint call of a conch horn from a watchtower. This city never truly sleeps. There's always someone feeding fire, grinding maize, guarding the causeways. But your duty begins before everyone else's. At the courtyard fountain, you pause to wash your face. The water is shockingly cold, and you whisper the purification prayer under your breath. The one calling upon Xalchutlashe, goddess of running waters. You scoop another handful over your head and feel your scalp tighten. That's when you notice your reflection trembling in the basin, your shaven temples, the streak of soot from last night's ceremony, still shadowing your jaw. You rub it off with the side of your thumb. Can't go before the gods looking like you slept through your shift? You wonder if the merchants stirring in their homes feel the same dread of lateness. They worry about missing their place in the market. You worry about displeasing the sun. Missing either could cost someone a life, though in your case, it might be literal. The sun, after all, is not a forgiving employer. You take your obsidian knife, more a sliver than a blade, and hold it toward the east. The horizon is still gray, but somewhere behind the volcanoes, the sun prepares its ascent. You whisper, "Tonatiuh, may your path be clear," and draw the blade lightly across your earlobe. A drop of blood slides down, warm in the cold air. It's a small thing, but that droplet is part of the contract your body for his light. You move toward the temple's base where other priests gather, all ghostly pale from fasting. You nod to one of them, old Tlahuizo, whose beard has gone gray, though he still sharpens knives for sacrifices. He murmurs something about a bad omen last night. The flame flickered sideways, meaning the god was restless. You file that away. In your world, small signs are never small. The drums grow louder now, echoing off the temple walls. Each beat thuds in your chest like a second heart. You pass a pair of young acolytes carrying bundles of copal resin, still blinking sleep from their eyes. One of them stumbles, spilling a few pellets onto the ground. You sigh and crouch to help, muttering that even gods prefer tidy offerings. He grins nervously and thanks you. You remember being that boy once terrified of every misstep, believing a single dropped grain might bring thunder down. You begin the ascent up the first set of steps, steep, narrow, meant to remind you that the divine is never easy to reach. The stone is damp, and you grip the edges for balance. Halfway up, you pause, not from fatigue, but from habit. From here, you can see the sleeping city stretched across the lake, its causeways cutting through mist like gray ribbons. Torches flicker on the docks, where early traders are already loading canoes with chilies and cacao. To the east, the mountains catch the first hint of blue. It's a breathtaking sight, even if you've seen it 1,000 times. Sometimes you think that's the real prayer, just looking, just remembering how small you are. The top platform greets you with a smell of old smoke and iron. You kneel beside the sacred brazier, stirring the ashes with a stick until the faintest ember glows red again. The act is simple. Feed it with dry bark, breathe on it gently, whisper the invocation. But the feeling, it's electric, like coaxing life back into a heart. When the flame finally leaps up, gold licking at your fingers, you whisper thanks. Somewhere below, a rooster crows. Perfect timing. Do you ever wonder you murmur to no one? If the gods tire of being woken every morning, Tlahuizo beside you snorts. Only when the priests forget to show up. You laugh softly. It's dangerous to laugh on duty, but humor, you've learned, keeps faith from becoming fear. Now the sky begins to pale, and you know soon the city will come alive. The merchants shouting, the children splashing in canals, the nobles heading to the palace. But for now, this fragile quiet belongs to you. The fire is awake, the first prayer is spoken, and the day's long dance between mortals and gods begins again. The water waiting for you in the purification pool is so cold it might as well be alive. It bites, slides, and clings like a serpent. You lower yourself into it slowly, hissing between your teeth as your skin shrinks from the chill. Still, this is what must be done before you stand before the gods. Your body, your breath, and even your thoughts must be clean. The priests say the water doesn't just wash away dirt. It scrapes the soul. Your fingers find the small stone bowl on the ledge. Inside lies a mixture of crushed sage lime and salt, your morning scrub. You rub it over your arms until your skin prickles, then over your scalp, where hair no longer grows shaved clean in the name of humility. It's odd how something as small as hair can separate man from devotion. A full head marks vanity, a bare scalp, obedience. You've done this for so many years, your reflection in the pool feels like someone else's, a ghost of flesh in the service of unseen powers. The city hasn't yet begun its clamor. The only sounds are the lapping water and the far-off murmurs of other priests bathing in their own corners of the compound. A scent of herbs drifts through the air. Someone nearby is burning copal again, maybe trying to cover the tang of blood from yesterday's ceremonies. Even purity has its shadows here. You lean forward, dipping your head under until sound disappears completely. Underwater, there's nothing but the slow rhythm of your own heartbeat. You stay like that, a little too long. There's comfort in the silence, even as your lungs begin to burn. When you finally surface, air rushes in like revelation. You wipe your face, blink at the light creeping into the courtyard, and whisper a thanks to Chalchutlikwe once more. She's never asked for much, just a little respect, a little awareness that all life flows from her veins. On the edge of the pool sits your small kit, a polished obsidian blade, a coil of thread, and a bowl filled with water tinted red by crushed annatto seeds. You pick up the blade carefully. Its edge is so sharp it could cut the morning itself. You press it against your forearm, not to wound, but to remind. A shallow line, a single bead of blood that runs down to meet the water below. The surface shivers as it swallows the drop, turning the reflection briefly crimson. Strange, isn't it? You think of how a surgeon today might sterilize his hands before an operation, or how an athlete might focus before a game. Rituals change shape, but their purpose never does to mark the threshold between the ordinary and the sacred. Yours just happens to involve pain. You reach for a small pot of ointment, a mix of aloe and ground marigold petals, and rub it gently over the cut. The sting fades almost instantly. The Aztecs have no shortage of remedies. It's the reason neighboring cities send their sick here, hoping for the touch of a priest-physician. You once helped treat a noble son who nearly died of fever. His mother brought gifts of cacao and jade, afterwards swearing the gods had saved him through your hands. You didn't correct her. Sometimes belief heals faster than medicine. Across the courtyard, a group of younger novices fumble through their own ablutions. One sneezes loudly, splashing the others. You can't help but grin. The memory rushes back of your first year, how you'd flinch every time the cold water hit, convinced it was punishment. The head priest, then stern old Tzitzimitl, had smacked you on the back and said, if the gods wanted you comfortable, boy, they'd have put you in the palace, not the temple. You think of him often, especially on mornings like this. He's long gone now, his ashes resting somewhere near the lake. The light strengthens. Steam rises from your skin as you stand and reach for a towel of woven agave fiber. You dry off briskly, then take the small jar of yellow ochre pigment. Dabbing your fingers in it, you mark your forehead, your chest, and both shoulders, each touch aligning you with the directions of the world. North for the wind, south for the rain, east for the rising sun, west for the descent into night. The motions come naturally, muscle memory turned into prayer. You catch your reflection again in the water. Your face looks older today. Lines deepened eyes, a little duller. Maybe it's the fasting. Or maybe it's the years of watching the same rituals play out under different skies. You remember your mother once saying, priests live twice as long, not in years, but in weight. Every prayer you carry adds another lifetime, she said. You didn't understand then. Now you do. You step away from the pool water dripping from your toes onto the smooth flagstones. The courtyard's torches flicker low, their oil nearly spent. One of the attendants brings a clay bowl of crushed flowers for anointing. You dip your fingertips, the scent of marigold and copal filling your nose, and trace slow circles over your wrists and temples. These are the gestures of readiness, the quiet armor of the faithful. The head priest Tlakotzin appears at the far archway, his tall headdress shadowing his face. The fires will need new breath soon, he says softly. His voice always sounds like it's come from the bottom of a well. You nod. The sun's edge now glows behind the mountains. Soon it will rise fully, and the city will awaken. But for now, the temple belongs to the few who can bear its silence. You glance back once more at the pool, the rippling surface, the faint red swirl fading under the sunlight. The gods demand much, but they give too meaning purpose order in a chaotic world. And maybe that's enough reason to keep bathing in the freezing dark. The stairs feel steeper every morning. Maybe the stones have grown since yesterday, or maybe your knees have simply become more honest. You grip the sides as you climb, balancing a clay bowl of copal in one hand and a bundle of dried bark in the other. Each step echoes with the hollow rhythm of sandals slapping stone. Above you, the first glow of dawn paints the temple's twin towers in pale gold, Huitzilopochtli on one side, Tlaloc on the other. The gods of sun and rain locked forever in partnership and competition. The smell of last night's offerings still clings to the air's smoke-charred maze, the faint sweetness of flowers wilted by fire. You reach the top platform where the sacred brazier sits cold and gray. It always looks smaller than you remember, as if humility itself were carved into its shape. The other priests are already gathering their white robes streaked with ash. You nod to them silently, setting your materials down. No one speaks much before the first flame. The morning requires stillness, the kind of quiet that feels like waiting inside the chest of the earth. You kneel before the brazier and strike flint against iron pyrite. Sparks jump like tiny suns, vanishing before they hit the ground. The third strike lands true. The bark catches smoke twirling upward in thin blue ribbons. You fan it gently with your hand, murmuring the prayer of awakening. May the breath of men meet the breath of gods, and neither falter. As the fire strengthens, you add pieces of copal resin. The smoke thickens, fragrant and white, coiling like serpents around the temple columns. It burns your eyes, and you blink through the tears, knowing they count as offerings too. The Aztecs believe every bodily act can be sanctified, sweat, breath, even pain. The body is not separate from worship. It is the vessel through which the invisible becomes visible. You reach for a small pouch at your belt and draw out kernels of maize bright as gold. One by one, you toss them into the flames. Each pop and crackle sounds like laughter or warning, depending on the mood of the god listening. The sun has not yet cleared the mountains, but already the light is changing. A crimson edge spills over the horizon, and for a heartbeat, the whole city seems to hold its breath. You raise your arms. He rises. The chant ripples through the other priests, low and steady, a chorus of gratitude and duty. Beneath you, Tenochtitlan begins to shimmer the canals, catching light like molten glass rooftops, flickering with reflected fire. The cries of market vendors start faintly, like a rehearsal for the day. It's beautiful in a way that almost hurts. And yet beauty in your world is never free. For the sun to rise, it must be fed. You know that soon, when the full ceremony begins, blood will join the fire again, not yet, but soon. For now, the duty is gentler. You add crushed flowers and cocoa shells to the flame, a symbolic meal to tide the gods over until later. One of the younger priests beside you coughs softly. His name is Kuaupili, new to the high altar. His hands tremble as he holds his bowl of offerings. You remember that same nervousness, the first time you stood here, the dizzying height, the realization that the city's fate might rest on whether your flame caught or not. Breathe slower, you whisper to him. The gods aren't in a hurry. He nods gratefully, steadying his breath, his eyes fixed on the flame like it's his own heartbeat. From the corner of your eye, you notice movement below the emperor's runners, crossing the plaza, carrying messages to the palace and the marketplaces. Their white garments flash in the sunlight as they move like silver fish through the crowd. Somewhere beyond, children chase each other along the causeway, their laughter floating faintly upward. The world continues unaware of the invisible cords you and the other priests are tightening between heaven and earth. Funny, isn't it, you think? People will spend hours polishing their hairpins, but they'll forget to thank the sun for showing up. Maybe that's why your job feels equal parts exhausting and absurd. Still, someone has to keep the balance. Someone has to remember the contracts made in the beginning. When the fire burns strong, you take a step back, allowing the wind to feed it. The smoke swirls upward in smooth, unbroken columns. You imagine it reaching Tonatiuh himself, the sun god, face-painted gold feathers blazing. You can almost see him stretching his arms, yawning after his night's journey through the underworld. It's ridiculous, you know. And yet in moments like this, the boundary between faith and imagination doesn't matter. What matters is that you believe just enough to keep the world spinning. The high priest raises a conch shell and blows. The sound cuts through the morning like a blade through silk. From every corner of the temple complex, echoes answer other shells, drums, flutes. The city begins to stir in rhythm with your fire. The sun lifts higher, the lake mirrors its glare, and the whole world seems to bloom. Someone hands you a cup of chocolate drink, unsweetened, thick bitter as medicine. You sip it slowly, savoring the warmth. The caffeine sharpens your senses, an ancient version of morning coffee. Imagine explaining this to someone 500 years from now, you think. They'd probably still be drinking it, just with more sugar and less reverence. The fire now burns steady, its core bright white. You whisper one final line, part habit, part hope. Let the day not devour us as we have fed it. The words hang in the air for a moment, before dissolving into smoke. You rise, joints creaking, and glance once more over the city's waking expanse. You've done your part. The gods have their meal. The sun has its stage. Time for the next duty, the living students waiting below, wide-eyed and hungry for knowledge you sometimes wish you didn't have. Knowledge is like fire, your old mentor used to say. Pass it carelessly, and someone's bound to get burned. The memory returns as you step into the Kalmakak, the priest's school in your second home since childhood. Inside, the air smells of chalk sweat and faint traces of incense. Rows of reed mats line the floor, and a dozen novices sit cross-legged, staring at you with the anxious devotion of puppies watching their trainer. You suppress a smile. Teaching them is as much an act of faith as any ritual. Your voice, still hoarse from the morning chants, carries through the room. So you begin clapping your hands once. Who remembers the difference between the nawal and the tonal? A few hands shoot up, hesitant. One boy blurts, the nawal is an animal spirit teacher. You nod, and the tonal silence. Only the crackling of a torch answers. You sigh dramatically. The tonal is your energy, your inner fire. Without it, you're just meat and memory. The novices exchange uneasy glances. You lean closer and whisper. And without discipline, your tonal slips away. You'd be surprised how fast. They giggle nervously. Humor helps fear alone turns faith into stone. You pick up a codex from the table deerskin pages, painted with brilliant pigments depicting gods, stars, and calendars. Each line, each color carries centuries of memory. You hold it up to the light. This, you tell them, is how we speak to time. The gods write in fire, but we write in pigment. Keep your hands steady, your eyes open, and your stomach empty. Hunger sharpens memory better than any tool. You guide them through the pages, explaining the months and rituals tied to each. See here, you point at a depiction of a man piercing his ear. That's the festival of Toxcatl. And here the offering of flowers to Xochipilli. Remember, not all gifts are blood. Some are beauty. You glance at one of the girls, a quiet novice named Malinal. She's sketching the glyph for wind god Ehecatl with perfect precision. You stop behind her and murmur, "Good." The gods love those who notice details. Even the wind can't fool a careful eye. She smiles, embarrassed, but proud. Outside, the morning sun filters through lattice windows, drawing patterns on the stone floor. A hummingbird darts past, flashing green and gold. One of the novices gasps softly, taking it as a sign of blessing. You don't correct him. Let them believe in omens while their hearts are still soft. Reality will harden them soon enough. Teaching isn't only about gods and calendars, it's about endurance. You make them memorize prayers until their tongues ache, carry water, until their arms tremble and stand in silence for an hour as incense coils sting their eyes. The temple expects obedience first, enlightenment later. You sometimes wonder if that order is backward. But then again, rebellion never fed a god. Halfway through the lesson, you catch one boy nodding off. You stride over, pluck the reed stylus from his limp hand, and tap his forehead. If the gods find you sleeping, they'll borrow your dreams, you tease. The others laugh, and he jolts awake, cheeks red. Or worse, you add they might put you in charge of morning duties. The laughter grows louder. You let it echo a moment before raising your hand for quiet. You remember your own training, the endless chants, the bruised knees, the pride of finally being allowed to touch the sacred flame. Back then, knowledge felt like a mountain, enormous, terrifying, and worth every climb. Now, after years of teaching, you realize it's more like a maze. The more paths you find, the less certain you are which one leads home. But that's the secret you keep from them. Doubt in the wrong hands is contagious. When the lesson turns to celestial cycles, you draw a rough diagram on the floor with a stick. This, you say, sketching a circle, is the movement of Venus. Every 8 years, she returns to the same place in the sky. We call her the twin star, the one who dies and is reborn, like you will many times before you're done learning. A few of them whisper prayers under their breath. You can tell which ones already feel the pull of priesthood and which still dream of escaping to the markets and dancing festivals. You don't blame them. You still dream sometimes too. A gong sounds from the courtyard below, signaling midday. The novices rise and bow. You tell them to fetch the offering trays, flowers, feathers, and bowls of maize for the noontime blessing. They move in a flurry of white cloth and soft sandals. You watch them go, realizing how their youth seems brighter against the gray of the temple stones. Before leaving, you turn to the altar at the far end of the room, where a small idol of Quetzalcoatl stands. Feathers carved in stone eyes inlaid with obsidian. You bow your head. The feathered serpent patron of learning art and renewal. Your favorite among the gods if one dares to have favorites. Keep them curious, you whisper to him, and keep me patient. You step outside, blinking in the sunlight. The smell of roasted maize drifts from the lower courtyards. Children laugh, dogs bark, traders haggle life, returning to its daily pulse. You roll your shoulders, muscles stiff from sitting, and glance up at the temple's peak. The fires you lit earlier still burn strong. A good sign. The gods have accepted the morning. Now it's time to offer something more personal, a little blood, a little pain, the currency of devotion that keeps everything spinning. The blade never looks dull, no matter how many years you've used it. Just a sliver of obsidian, black smooth, almost beautiful. You hold it up to the sunlight filtering through the courtyard arch, and it flashes like a liquid shadow. You could almost forget it's meant for pain. Almost. You kneel on the woven mat before the altar, where bowls of flowers and feathers sit beside clay dishes filled with dried maguey thorns. The scent of copal hangs thick in the air, curling through your nostrils and settling heavy in your chest. You steady your breath. The first offering of the day was to awaken the gods. This one is to remind them that you haven't forgotten your side of the bargain. You pinch a maguey's spine between your fingers, feel its point tremble against your skin. The novices nearby shift nervously, watching. They'll have to do this too someday. Pain is a teacher. You tell them, your tone calm, almost gentle. Ignore it, and it will teach you again. You press the thorn through the flesh of your thigh. The sting is sharp, but familiar, the kind of pain that has a rhythm, enter pulse release. You collect the blood in a folded strip of paper bark, careful not to spill a drop. Every priest does this. Some draw from the ears, some from the tongue or calves. Each wound is a message, small but loud enough for the gods to hear. The blood symbolizes renewal, humility, and devotion. But you've learned something else over the years. It's also about focus. For those few seconds when your skin breaks and your breath hitches, you're completely present. No distractions, no errands, no noise from the markets below. Just the pulse, the offering, and the awareness that you're alive. You place the paper bark on the burning brazier. It curls instantly, releasing a thin trail of smoke that carries your prayer upward. The novices mimic your motion with their own tiny pricks, hesitant, clumsy, yet determined. One boy at Scoatl gasps when his thorn bites too deep. You hand him a strip of clean cloth and whisper, "Even the gods started with small mistakes." He nods, eyes wide, blood pooling in his palm, like a secret he doesn't yet know how to hold. You stand wiping your fingers on a cloth and feel the dull warmth spreading through your leg. It's not agony. It's a reminder. You glance toward the courtyard gate where the sun now blazes overhead. The city is awake, vendors, shouting canoes, gliding children running barefoot along the canal edges. None of them see you, of course. The priest's life is a different current flowing parallel to the world, but never fully touching it. Sometimes you envy them. The ones who can laugh without checking for omens, who can eat without naming it a ritual. But envy is a sin of the idle, and priests are never idle for long. You turn your mind back to the task, reading omens from the smoke. The smoke thickens, twisting into shapes only you can interpret. At first you see nothing, then a flicker, a wave, a rising curl that splits in two. A sign of division. Perhaps a quarrel brewing among the noble families, or storms coming from the east. You'll record it later in the codex, next to the day's symbol. A jaguar biting the sun. You make a note in your head, a warning. The sound of footsteps breaks your focus. It's High Priest Tlakahtsin again, his presence as quiet as ever. He studies the smoke beside you, his eyes half closed. "The east wind speaks," he murmurs. "We should prepare the offering of maize before midday." You nod. His voice carries the authority of years, and though he rarely raises it, people listen. He notices the blood on your thigh and the reddened strip of bark on the brazier. "Good," he says softly. "The gods remember those who feed them." You want to ask whether the gods ever tire of being fed, but that's not a question a wise man asks aloud. A breeze sweeps through the courtyard, scattering flower petals across the floor. You watch them drift like slow golden snow. For a brief moment, the air smells sweeter, almost tender, as if the gods themselves were sighing. You think of how some modern people cut their palms to swear loyalty or tattoo symbols on their skin as promises. The gesture is the same, just the language has changed. You smile at the thought, a small bridge across time. Would they still call this barbaric if they knew it was about discipline, not cruelty? The novices finish their offerings. Their faces are pale, but proud sweat shining on their foreheads. You motion for them to kneel. Remember this feeling, you tell them. Pain leaves fast. Meaning stays longer. They repeat your words softly, as if carving them into their tongues. The ceremony ends without grandeur. You bow once, collect the ashes, and store them in a clay jar labeled with today's date glyph. Later, the ashes will be buried under the temple floor, a tiny archive of faith hidden beneath centuries of stone. You wash your hands in a bowl of water scented with lime. The red swirls dissolve into faint pink before vanishing completely. The city's noise drifts closer. Now laughter drums the cry of a fruit seller announcing ripe avocados. Life keeps pulsing unbothered by your small sacrifice. As you dry your hands, one of the younger acolytes asks quietly, "Does it ever stop hurting, Master?" You look at him for a long moment. The honest answer would be no, but you say instead, "You get used to remembering why it must." He nods solemnly, as if that alone has made him older. Somewhere behind you, the conch horn sounds again, calling priests to descend into the streets. Time to step outside the temple walls and face the mortal world. The smoke still curls upward as you leave fragile and white against the sky, a soft whisper that vanishes before anyone below even notices it was there. By the time you step beyond the temple gates, the city has completely changed character. Gone is the sacred hush of the morning courtyards. Tenochtitlan now hums like a living creature. The air is full of noise and movement, the slap of paddles in the canals, the rhythmic call of merchants, the laughter of children darting between stalls. You adjust your plain cotton cloak and pull your hood slightly forward. Even in the crowd, priests stand out bare feet, shaven heads the faint shimmer of incense clinging to skin. You walk along the causeway that leads toward the main market square. Water glints between the stone blocks, and the scent of blooming lilies drifts up from the canals. Canoes loaded with vegetables and flowers glide silently past, steered by women with faces like carved jade. Every so often, someone nods in greeting or offers you a handful of maize as a blessing. You return the gesture with a murmured prayer. Here, even commerce feels sacred. Exchange is another form of worship. At the edge of the plaza, you pause to watch the city unfold. Thousands of stalls spread across the square, each arranged with almost military precision. One sells obsidian mirrors that catch the light like black water. Another displays cacao beans piled neatly in baskets, the currency of daily life. The smell of grilled fish mixes with the sweetness of honeyed amaranth cakes. You can't help smiling. The gods may own the temples, you think, but the people own the rhythm. Your duty here isn't to shop. It's to observe, to read the subtle language of daily life. Every gesture, every bargain can reveal an omen if you know how to look. You stop beside a maize vendor and ask for a handful of kernels to use for divination. She bows her head respectfully and pours them into your palm. You crouch beside her stall, close your eyes, and whisper the words that open the reading. May the corn speak with the tongue of truth. You cast the kernels onto a woven mat. They scatter in a rough semicircle, a few overlapping, one rolling stubbornly away. You trace their pattern with your fingertip. 3 clustered together near the edge, sign of prosperity. 2 lying apart, symbol of caution. 1 upside down, warning of illness or discord. You glance up at the vendor and say gently, "Take care of your youngest son. His spirit is restless." She gasps, her hand flying to her chest. "He's been coughing for days," she says. You smile softly. "Give him more rest and a little honey water. The gods send signs so we can act, not despair." As you rise, she presses a small bundle of chilies into your hand in thanks. You tuck it into your belt. You'll burn them later, as an offering gratitude should never travel alone. You move deeper into the market, stopping to greet familiar faces. The fisherman with one eye who always swears his catch was blessed by Talailoch. The potter who paints tiny suns in cider bowls. The old woman who sells paper figures for ceremonies. You buy a few of her cutouts, miniature gods, with folded arms and stern expressions. They keep the spirits calm, she says, her voice cracked like dry clay. You nod. Or entertained, you add. She laughs, toothless but bright. At the far end of the square, a small crowd gathers around a storyteller. His voice rises above the din, recounting how the god Tezcatlipoca once turned himself into a jaguar and swallowed the world. Children squeal, half thrilled, half terrified. You linger at the edge, listening. The story is old one you've told yourself 100 times, but hearing it from a commoner's lips always stirs something. Their gods are not confined to temples. They live in jokes, in fears, in the way people shrug at thunder and say, "Ah, he's angry again." A boy bumps into you, nearly knocking over your bowl of offerings. He looks up wide-eyed. "Sorry, priest," he blurts. You chuckle and ruffle his hair. "The gods forgive you faster than I do, you tease." He grins and darts off. You pass a group of nobles carried on litters, their cloaks heavy with feathers. They avoid your gaze. Priests make even the powerful uneasy. Too many omens, too much unseen knowledge. You watch them go, their laughter loud, their shadows long. Everyone fears what they can't measure, you think. Even emperors flinch at prophecy. Further down, you pause by a narrow canal bridge. You lean against the railing, looking at your reflection in the water. Ripples distort your face until it seems like someone else stares back, a man stretched between worlds. You wonder what you'd look like to a foreigner who'd never seen your city, a holy man or a magician, a servant of gods, or just another performer in a ritual too old to question. The thought makes you smile. Maybe both are true. You dip your fingers into the water, tracing a small circle. Blessed be the paths of those who crossed today. You whisper a simple prayer for peace in the markets. A heron lands a few paces away, elegant and still. And for a fleeting second, you take it as a sign, a messenger from the lake goddess herself. You bow slightly in acknowledgement when you turn back toward the temple. Your hands are full of the day's small exchanges, kernels, chilies, folded paper gods. Offerings not from nobles or warriors, but from the city's pulse. You realize with quiet amusement that the gods might prefer these over any gold or feathered headdress. The walk home feels lighter. Behind you, the market continues its song laughter, drums the splash of oars. Ahead, the temple rises again, its shadow cast long across the lake. You climb the steps slowly, savoring the ache in your legs. You've been awake since before dawn, but the day is only halfway done. Inside, the novices await with trays of offerings. One of them asks, "Master, what did the omen say today?" You drop the chilies into the brazier and reply, "The gods are content, for now." You pause, then grin, though they might enjoy a good meal soon. The boy laughs nervously, unsure whether you're joking. And somewhere in the distance, drums begin again, low, steady, hungry. The drums hit before the scent does. Deep, thunderous booms roll through the city, like the heartbeat of something enormous, and then the air fills with the perfume of crushed marigolds, roasted maize, and sweat. Festival day. You can feel it before you even see it. By the time you reach the temple courtyard, the place is alive, banners snapping in the wind, petals carpeting the stairs, dancers painting their bodies with blue and red pigment under the noonday sun. It's one of those days when Tenochtitlan forgets to breathe. The feast of Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, the sun, and the city itself. Everyone from nobles to slaves shows up. The emperor will appear soon cloaked in turquoise to offer his blessing. You, though, have a simpler role to keep the ceremony from falling apart. You've done it before dozens of times yet. Your pulse still quickens. You weave through the crowd of priests and attendants, adjusting the folds of your white robe. The air hums with heat and anticipation. Drummers line the plaza, their instruments carved from hollowed tree trunks and painted with glyphs of flame. Every strike sends vibrations up your legs, through your ribs, into your skull. You glance around. Every priest is in motion. Some carry bowls of flowers, others balance censers, spilling sweet clouds of incense. A few novices sprinkle colored maize powder along the ground, marking sacred paths for the procession. Someone calls your name. You turn to see Tlacotzin, the high priest, standing on the temple steps, his headdress of eagle feathers gleaming. It's time, he says, voice booming, even without effort. You nod, step forward, and take your place beside him. Below, thousands of faces tilt upward like petals, turning toward light. The procession begins. You and the other priests raise your arms, chanting the invocation. The words aren't yours. They're older than the city, passed down like river stones, smoothed by generations of tongues. You don't think about their literal meaning anymore. It's the rhythm that matters, the way it vibrates through the body and into the air, a bridge between heartbeat and thunder. Dancers surge forward, their feet slapping the ground in perfect sync with the drums. Feathers whirl, gold catches sunlight, and the whole plaza becomes a living mosaic. Children throw flower petals, women wave fans made of quetzal plumes, and even the guards grin beneath their helmets. The line between reverence and celebration blurs. Here worship and joy share the same skin. Do you ever think the gods get jealous of us? You whisper to the novice beside you. He blinks in confusion. We get to feel the dance, you say, but they only get the smoke. The boy smiles uncertainly, unsure if you're joking. You are, mostly. From the palace steps, the emperor appears. The crowd erupts, bowing low. He walks slowly, solemnly, every movement rehearsed and symbolic. You lower your head too, though you've seen this ritual 100 times. When he reaches the altar, Tlacotzin presents him with a torch from the sacred fire. The emperor lights the ceremonial brazier, and the flames roar to life, swallowing the midday glare. Now comes the offering, food, drink, music, and yes, blood. But today, it's symbolic only. A few drops from the emperor's arm, enough to mark gratitude without inviting fear. He doesn't flinch as the obsidian tip touches his skin. The crowd exhales, relieved. You murmur a prayer under your breath, may the sun never hunger in vain. Drums rise again, faster now. The dancers whirl until their feathers blur into color. You catch a whiff of roasted cocoa honey and sweat. It smells like life itself. The sound, the scent, the vibration, it's overwhelming, intoxicating. Even you, bound by discipline, feel it seep under your skin. It's not madness, it's communion. You think of festivals in other times and places. Modern parades, fireworks, concerts. They may have lost the blood and gods, but the heartbeat's the same. Humanity still gathers to make noise big enough to remind itself it exists. Maybe the divine never left. It just changed outfits. The sun begins to tilt westward, shadows stretching across the plaza. The crowd starts to sing, tens of thousands of voices rising as one. The words praise Huitzilopochtli, the warrior of light, but the melody, slow, spiraling upward, feels like longing. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you. For a moment, you forget your station, your title, even your own name. You are just another heartbeat in the city's chest. When you open your eyes, the Emperor has begun his slow descent down the temple steps. The crowd parts bowing. Behind him, priests carry the sacred banners, Eagle, Jaguar, Serpent, Sun. You follow, holding a bowl of marigold petals that spill in golden arcs with every step. The air trembles with heat and incense, and the lake in the distance glows like molten glass. By the time the procession reaches the plaza again, the music has softened. People begin laying offerings. At the foot of the temple, flowers, shells, carved figurines, even the occasional piece of jewelry. You kneel to bless them, sprinkling water scented with basil and smoke. The sun dips lower its edge, touching the mountains. The last drumbeat echoes, fading like a sigh. The crowd lingers in silence, a rare, perfect silence. For a heartbeat, even the wind holds its breath. Then, as if on cue, a flock of birds takes flight, their wings flashing silver in the dying light. You smile faintly. The gods are pleased. Tlakotzin murmurs beside you, or at least entertained. You chuckle softly. Let's hope they stay that way until morning. As you turn toward the temple steps, your hands still smell of marigolds and smoke. The petals stick to your palms like sunlight refusing to leave. The day's joy will fade by nightfall, replaced once more by duty and calculation. But for now, you allow yourself a rare moment of contentment. You've helped feed the gods and the people both. And tonight maybe you'll dream of feathers instead of fire. The temple feels different after sundown. The crowds have gone, the drums are silent, and the air hums with the kind of stillness only found after great noise. You climb to the roof of the Kalmakak, your legs heavy from the day's ceremonies. The stones radiate the leftover heat of sunlight, and for a moment you just stand there, letting it soak through your feet. Below Tenochtitlan glimmers like a mirror sprinkled with stars, the canals reflecting torches, the causeways glowing faintly under the moon. This is your favorite hour. The time when the city exhales and the gods start whispering again. A cool breeze moves across the lake, carrying the smell of night-blooming flowers and wet stone. You settle beside a low table, covered in codices and bowls of charcoal ink. On the table's edge sits a circular board carved with tiny glyphs, the sky calendar. A few novices linger nearby, waiting for your signal to begin the night's task. Remember, you say softly, the heavens don't move for us, we move through them. Pay attention, and you'll never be lost. You gesture upward where the first stars begin to pierce the purple sky. There's Venus, our twin, our morning and evening herald. Watch her. She's the messenger of changes, empires, harvests, storms. One of the boys squints, trying to find the bright dot above the horizon. That one, he asks. You smile. That one. She's right on time. You reach for the polished obsidian disc beside you. It reflects the heavens, perfectly turning stars into tiny drops of liquid light. You tilt it, catching the reflection of Venus, and begin marking her position in the codex. Your brush moves with practiced grace, dipping into ink, sweeping across the deerskin page. The others do the same, recording constellations. The moons curve the drift of clouds. This is science in its oldest form, faith and geometry entwined. Somewhere in the distance, a night heron cries. You glance toward the lake and catch a faint flicker, a torch gliding along the canal. Fishermen still working. The gods of earth and sky may sleep, but the gods of hunger never do. You think of the farmers, the traders, the mothers nursing their children under reed roofs. They'll never see the stars, as you do never learn the codes hidden in the sky. Yet their lives depend on your readings, when to plant, when to feast, when to fight. You draw another line on the codex, Venus nearing conjunction with the moon. A sign of harmony you murmur. The gods are at peace for now. A novice nearby scribbles the words eagerly, his face glowing with pride. You chuckle. Don't write faster than the stars move, boy. They have their own pace. Sometimes you wonder how many future generations will look up and see what you see. Will they still believe the heavens are alive? Or will they call it something else? Astronomy, physics, calculation? Maybe one day someone will stand on another world and still whisper the same words you do tonight. She's right on time. You stretch, feeling your spine crack like dry bamboo. The sky has deepened to indigo, and the first thin clouds drift in from the west. The scent of rain floats faintly in the air. You glance at the water clock beside you, a slow drip from a suspended gourd into a clay bowl. Each drop marks the passing of time in sound, soft but relentless. Beside you, the elder astrologer, Ocelotl, clears his throat. "You've been quiet tonight," he says. His voice is a mix of gravel and patience. Too quiet. You shrug. The stars are kind. That usually means something below isn't. He laughs softly, still suspicious after all these years. You grin. It's part of the job description. He looks out over the city. Do you ever tire of it? Watching the same sky, the same stars, year after year? You consider it. No, you finally say. The sky never repeats itself. It just wears the same face. He nods satisfied. Good. That means you still belong here. He rises and leaves you to your work. The night deepens. The novices finish their notes, yawning behind their sleeves. You wave them off to rest. Alone now, you dip your brush again and draw the final symbols for the day. 2 intertwining serpents, the path of Venus across the sun. You whisper the closing line. What moves above moves below. You pause brush, hovering mid-air. The stars blur for a moment, and your thoughts drift to the Emperor. Tomorrow he'll ask for your interpretation of the omens. If Venus aligns with the moon, he may take it as a sign to launch another campaign. You'll have to choose your words carefully. One misplaced metaphor could start a war. The heavens may be calm, but men rarely are. You close the codex, carefully wrapping it in cotton cloth. The wind has shifted cooler now, with a trace of rain. You lean on the parapet, watching clouds gather over the mountains. The city's torches shimmer faintly below. Somewhere a lone flute plays from a canal boat, the melody low and sweet. You smile. The song drifts upward, mixing with the whisper of the star. So you murmur to no one. Even the heavens have their music. The rain begins softly, tiny drops, darkening the stone around you. You stay where you are, letting them tap your skin, each one cold and clean. The ink dries on your fingers. In the faint reflection of the obsidian mirror, Venus still glows steady, unbothered by clouds, as if she knows you're watching. You whisper a final prayer for guidance, not for the gods, but for yourself. You're their translator after all, and translators, you've learned, are always one mistake away from rewriting destiny. By the time the stars have crossed halfway through the sky, the temple has quieted into a hush so deep you can hear the oil lamps crackle. This is the hour of confession, the moment when Tenochtitlan bares its soul. You descend from the Kalmakak roof, your sandals whispering against the cool stone steps, and head toward the courtyard, where the penitents wait. The night is heavy with the scent of copal smoke. Torches flicker along the walls, painting the faces of those who've come seeking absolution. Some are nobles, others simple workers, each clutching small offerings of maize flowers or paper cutouts. Guilt is the great equalizer. It erases titles faster than death. You settle onto a woven mat beneath the stone archway. The novices sit nearby, ready to record confessions on bark paper scrolls, but they'll hear only what's permitted, never the intimate details whispered between sinner and God. You motion for the first petitioner to come forward. It's a woman with tired eyes and a shawl that smells faintly of river water. She kneels trembling. "Forgive me, priest," she says. "I stole maize from my neighbor's storehouse. My children were hungry." You study her face, the hollow cheeks, the cracked lips. "Did you repay what you took?" She shakes her head. "I couldn't." You sigh softly. "Then feed them first. Bring maize to your neighbor later, double what you took." The gods despise greed, not survival. Her eyes fill with tears. You lift a small bowl of incense, wafting the smoke over her head. Chalchiutlaike forgives the desperate. Go in peace. She bows, low tears dripping onto the floor, and leaves lighter than when she came. Next comes a young warrior, broad-shouldered scars, tracing his arms like vines. He kneels clutching a blood-stained feather. "I killed a man outside the ritual grounds," he confesses. Not in battle, but in rage. The torches flicker. The courtyard seems to shrink around him. You glance toward Tlakotsin, who stands in shadow listening. Murder outside ceremony is grave, yet even here justice and mercy wrestle. Why, you ask quietly? "He insulted my brother," the man says. "He mocked our family." You exhale slowly. "So you defended honor by losing your soul." He bows his head. You take a thorn from the bowl beside you, prick your thumb, and let a drop of your blood fall into the brazier. The gods forgive those who bleed for truth, you say. But they do not forget. Serve 3 moons in the temple kitchens. Feed others until you understand the hunger your anger left behind. The man nods, voice breaking with gratitude. One by one they come, merchants who cheated scales' wives, who envied neighbors, youths who mocked sacred dances. Some whisper confessions so absurd you almost smile. One boy admits to cursing his dog for eating his tortillas. "Did the dog live, you ask?" "Yes," he mumbles. "Then your curse was weak," you say, waving him off. Spend less energy on dogs, more on devotion. The novices stifle laughter. Even the gods, you think, must appreciate a little humor. The courtyard fills and empties like a tide. Each soul leaves behind a sliver of darkness, and by the end, the air feels thick with it. You stir the brazier, feeding the smoke, until it curls toward the night side, carrying those confessions upward. You've done this countless times, but it never feels routine. The weight of so many lives presses gently on your shoulders. As you wash your hands in a bowl of flower-scented water, a small voice speaks behind you. Master says Malinal, the quiet novice from your lessons, who forgives the priests. You pause. She stands barefoot, holding a torch too big for her hands. The question lingers between you, heavy as stone. You look down at your reflection in the water. Tired eyes ash on your skin, a faint trace of blood from the day's rituals. The gods, you answer, finally. Or no one at all. She frowns. But what if the gods forget? You meet her gaze. Then we remind them. That's what the fire is for. She nods slowly, understanding more than her years should allow. You watch her carry the torch to relight a dying lamp, her face glowing gold in the flame's flicker. For a moment, you glimpse what you once were, a novice with steady hands and endless questions. The courtyard empties completely. The last petitioner bows and leaves behind a handful of maize kernels, glimmering pale in the torchlight. You sweep them into a small pouch. They'll be fed to the temple birds at dawn. You sink back onto the mat, exhaustion creeping through your bones. The night air has turned cool and damp. Somewhere beyond the walls, the lake laps quietly, and frogs sing their wet lullabies. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to listen to the echoes of all the voices that just passed through your hands. Each one a story, each one a reminder that holiness is just humanity with sharper edges. You think of how confession looks in other times. People sitting in wooden booths, whispering through screens, or maybe typing their sins into glowing rectangles. Different rituals, same ache. Everyone still wants to be told it's going to be okay. A gust of wind snuffs out one of the torches, and shadows leap across the walls. You rise slowly, take your own torch, and relight it from the brazier. The flame catches instantly, dancing bright and alive. You whisper a line your teacher once said, "Every confession is a candle fragile flickering, but still light." You set the torch back into its holder, watch the shadows retreat. The night is nearly over now. You can already feel the pull of dawn somewhere beyond the mountains. One more ceremony remains before you can rest the final prayers that close the day. You gather the scrolls, the bowls, the ashes, and carry them inside. Behind you, the smoke lingers for a long while, curling toward the sky like an unspoken promise that no soul, however flawed, ever disappears completely. The temple breathes differently at midnight. The torches shrink to their last embers, the drums have gone silent, and the air is so still that you can hear your own pulse echoing in your ears. Above, the stars lean close over Tenochtitlan, like curious witnesses. You climb the narrow steps toward the sanctuary once more, the same path you walked at dawn, only now in reverse. Everything smells of cooling stone and fading incense, the residue of a day lived entirely for the gods. At the top, the sacred fires have dimmed into quiet coals. You kneel beside them, feeding a few chips of copal resin into the ash. The smoke rises in soft silver ribbons, carrying the last prayers of the city into the night. May the sun sleep well, you whisper, and remember to wake. It's the same line you've spoken every night for decades, yet it never loses its gravity. Because if the sun ever forgets, so does life. You close your eyes, resting your palms on the warm stone. The world feels distant now. The laughter from the canals, the marketplace chatter, even the confessions of an hour ago. All of it fades into a single hum, the slow heartbeat of the city. You wonder not for the first time if the gods can hear you as clearly as you hear them. A breeze drifts through the temple corridors, carrying faint hints of rain and crushed flowers. You breathe it in. The scent of the feast still lingers, marigolds, cocoa, roasted maize, an olfactory ghost of daylight. You think of the dancers who spun themselves dizzy under the sun, of the novices whose fingers trembled as they bled, of the woman who stole maize, the warrior who confessed murder. All of them have gone home, and you remain the last voice awake in a city of dreams. The sky has begun to pale slightly at the edges, not with dawn, but with the moon's quiet retreat. Venus still gleams faithful as ever. You tilt your head back, following her ascent, and smile. She's where she should be, like a silent promise that order still holds. You reach into the small pouch at your waist and take out the folded paper figures you bought in the market earlier. They've creased a little, but the colors remain bright. You place them gently on the altar, tiny gods made by mortal hands and bow. A gift from your children, you murmur, who may not know your names, but still feel your gaze. The flames flicker in response, or maybe it's just the wind pretending to listen. Then comes the final part of the day, reflection. You sit cross-legged, letting your mind unwind in slow circles. You recall the first time you sat here as a novice, knees shaking, desperate not to blink before the flame. You remember your mentor's hand on your shoulder, steadying you. The gods are watching, he'd said. But they're not waiting to punish. They're waiting to see if you'll notice them noticing you. You hadn't understood it then. Now it makes perfect sense. Faith isn't obedience, it's awareness. The ability to see the sacred in repetition, to find wonder in the ordinary. You've spent your life repeating the same rituals, lighting the same fires, reciting the same words. Yet somehow, it's different each time. Because you are different each time. That's the hidden mercy of devotion. Even monotony becomes sacred when done with full attention. You glance down at your hands, calloused, stained, faintly red, from the morning's offerings. Still here, you murmur, flexing your fingers. Still burning. A soft sound interrupts your thoughts, footsteps. It's Melinal again, the young novice. She appears in the doorway holding a small bowl of water. For washing before rest, she says quietly. You nod. You're learning fast. She smiles shyly, setting the bowl beside you. The reflection of the flame dances in her eyes. Master, she whispers, do you ever tire of the gods? The question makes you laugh softly, not mockingly, but with the tenderness of recognition. Sometimes you admit. But then I remember, without them, who would I be? She nods slowly, seeming to understand, and leaves you in peace. The bowl's surface trembles as the wind sighs through the open chamber. You dip your hands into it, feeling the coolness spread across your palms. The gesture feels like closure, a quiet punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. You rise, stretch, and take one last look over the city. The lake mirrors the moon. In the causeways gleam faintly silver veins in the sleeping earth. Somewhere a dog barks faint and lonely. Somewhere else someone prays for dawn without knowing you've already secured it for them. You smile at the thought. Every day you wake the sun. Every night you tuck it in. No one thanks you, and you don't expect them to. The reward is the work itself, the rhythm, the repetition, the endless negotiation between man and the divine. You're the hinge between worlds, the voice that reminds both sides to keep talking. As the first faint streaks of gray appear in the east, you add the last piece of copal to the coals. The smoke rises in a perfect spiral, vanishing into the brightening sky. You bow your head and whisper, "Sleep well, old gods. The world will still need you when it wakes." And in that moment, standing alone atop the silent pyramid, you realize the strangest truth of all. Perhaps the gods dream of you too. And now, as the final embers fade and the temple drifts into silence, you feel the same peace the priest once knew. Steady breath, quiet heart, the world wrapped in calm. Let the echoes of drums become your heartbeat, the whisper of smoke your dreams. Rest now, traveler of time. The gods are watching over your sleep.